Hi everyone. We are going to look into one of the interesting poems in English literature entitled Television, composed by one of the great authors named Roald Dahl. The initial lines of this particular poem has been jotted down in this slide, which is going to give us the hint of what this entire poem is all about. It reads, the most important thing we have learned so far as children are concerned, is never let them near your television set. So, herein we find out, or rather, we can find out that the poet is going to talk about the negative effects of television. But in a poem of about more than 90 lines, it's obvious that he is going to talk a lot more about just the negative effects. So it's time for us to find out what they are. Before we move on to the text of this poem, Television by Roald Dahl, let's see the entire poem in brief so that we can easily grasp the idea when we go to the explanation of the text. Here in this poem, the poet tries to advise all the parents to never let the children watch television or not to install it in the first place. He tries to bring out the negative effects of the television, one of it being television making the children loll and slop and sluggish and not letting them to engage themselves in very active and productive work. The hypnotic effect of television, making it convenient to the parents for keeping the children keep quiet and calm while doing their household chores. Television is that monster, according to the poet, that kills children's imagination and rots their senses. The poet addresses the issue to the parents and reminds them how they used to spend their time reading books. Therefore, in this poem, you will also find out the importance of reading books or how reading books is actually a journey that is going to fill you with joy. The poet furthermore appeals to the parents to replace these monstrous television sets with beautiful bookshelves filled with lovely books. He also tells the parents, or rather warns the parents, that children are going to protest in the initial stage of transition. But it's time for us not to be scared of those things, rather, to know that with the passage of time, they are going to get used to it. This journey of reading will be filled with joy, according to the poet. And he also tells the parents that the children later on are going to ultimately thank all the parents for doing this deed of replacing the monstrous television sets with beautiful bookshelves. Now it's time for us to move on to the text of the poem. It reads, the most important thing we have learned so far as children are concerned is never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. Here, the poet tries to tell the parents he is trying to become, or rather has already become, a kind of a mouthpiece for a number of people. He begins by saying that the most important thing they have known regarding children is that they should not allow the children. He is telling this to the parents that they should not allow their children to watch television. Furthermore, he comes up with a better idea That is, in the first place, not to bring that television set at home. Continues, in almost every house we have watched them gaping at the screen. It seems the poet has done some research of going house to house to find out what the children are doing. So when he does that, he sees that they are engaged. All the children are engaged, gaping at the screen. Here, the word gaping means to look at the screen, watching with eyes wide open for a very, very long time. So they are very much busy watching the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week, in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. So, here the poet tries to talk about the lazy activity that the children engage themselves in while watching television. They act in a very, very lazy manner. The words like loll and slop and lounge, they are all to do with laziness. And he talks about a dozen eyeballs on the floor. So here, do not go by the literal sense. Here, what he is trying to do is he is trying to exaggerate. There is one particular figure of speech called hyperbole, which is used in order to put in more emphasis to the condition. Therefore, he has been using this particular figure of speech, in fact, in order to emphasize on the fact how children are very busy in watching television. He says, last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. Here, when you are reading this particular piece, you have to imagine things. And when you imagine the eyeballs popping out on the floor, it is something that is going to give you a sense of humor. So, therefore, Roald Dahl also uses a sense of humor, comic effect in this particular expression. They sit and stare and sit until they are hypnotized by it, until they are absolutely drunk with all that sucking, ghastly junk. So, here, the words that he uses also is going to give us the hint of his mood here. He is quite angry, it seems. Look at the word like shocking, ghastly junk. This is an expression of sheer anger. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. And now poet actually tries to tell the readers that how television is actually keeping the children calm and how parents are taking the benefit of it. Oh yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out of the window sill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop to think? To wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved thought? So he is just coming up with a very emphatic or a very relevant question to the readers, especially to the parents of the children who are letting their kids off with the screens like television. If you want to make it relevant to today's scenario, most of the parents do give their mobile phones to their children to keep them calm. He is telling that yes, it is true that these devices, or rather television in particular, is going to keep the children calm and let you do your work at peace. But do you think what great damage you are doing with your activity? So here you can see the entire piece in block letters. Now, when we talk about netiquettes is the etiquette that we follow in digital world. The capital letters actually suggest the anger of the writer, if it is not only to emphasize. Here he says, it rots the sense in the head. With full of anger, the poet tells the parents who let their children off with the television screen all the time and do their work at peace. He is suggesting them, is rather telling them how television is very, very dangerous. He gives the reasons like television rots the sense in the head, and this is a device that kills imagination. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind. He can no longer understand a fantasy, a fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. Now, it is very much common in today's world how fascinated we are of watching movies on the screen or watching videos on the screen and entertain ourselves rather than going to the business of reading. And this is also the fact that we are not being able to imagine. When we actually watch the videos on the screen, we are watching somebody else's imagination. There is no scope for the people like us, the watchers like us, to imagine anything because it is already imagined and put up on the screen. Therefore, whenever somebody is engaged in watching television, his or her imagination will die. And you are going to be a dull and a blind creature who no longer understand the glory of fantasy and the joy of imagination being in a fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese, and his powers of thinking rust and freeze. The power of thinking is going to corrode, it is going to get damaged, and it is going to be freezed, or rather frozen. He cannot think, but the only thing he can do is he can see. All right, you will cry. All right, you will say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. Now, the poet actually is trying to empathize with the parents as well and puts up these few lines as the lines from the parents, crying out, all right, but if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. We'll answer this by asking you, what use the darling wants to do? How used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten? Don't you know? We'll all say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They'd read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks. Here the poet tries to explain to the curious and inquisitive minds, if they are going to let the television away from their house, how are they going to entertain their children? They are quite inquisitive about it. Therefore, the poet explains it by taking the parents back to the age, what they used to do, how they used to get involved in doing things, what were the things that they got involved into when television was not invented. And he questions them, don't you know? Have you forgotten? So here, with a sense of a bit anger, he is questioning the parents that if they have forgotten what they used to do. And he, again, putting a lot of emphasis there with capital letters, Remind He reminds the parents they used to read. They read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Now, great Scott and Gadzooks, these are the exclamations. Something annoying and something shocking. One half their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore. Books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bedroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous fine fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens, and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores, where smuggler rowed with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants and sailing ships and elephants, and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good. What can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope. Here, the poet actually tries to remind the parents that before the invention of the device called television, the children were engaged in reading. And the reading was in that sense that books could be found everywhere, be it on the nursery shelves, nursery floor, in the bedroom, or the children's bed. And furthermore, he tries to come up with short list of books used to be read before. The books that were filled with the tales of treasure islands, voyages, smugglers, pirates, sailing ships, elephants, and cannibals. He also refers to the typical stories that the children read in his days. The younger ones had Beatrix Potter with Mr. Todd, the dirty rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Pigling Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, and just how the camel got his hump, and how the monkey lost his rump, and Mr. Toad, and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Moon. Oh, books. What books they used to know, those children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away, and in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. So herein, the poet actually tries to refer to the stories that children used to read in his days. He also refers about the tales of Mr. Toad, Squirrel Nutkin, Pigling Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, written by Beatrix Potter. And Beatrix Potter's book actually, are filled with animals as characters and colorful illustrations. Moreover, in the further lines, we can see the poet actually requesting the parents, so oh please, we beg. In fact, he uses the word beg. We pray, go through your television. He desperately is trying to make the parents, or rather convince parents, to throw away the television sets. And in that place where their televisions are kept, you replace that television sets with the bookshelves. And after bringing the bookshelves, then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks. The screams and yells and the bites and kicks, the children hitting you with sticks. Oh my God. After he suggests the parents to fill the bookshelves with the beautiful books, he warns the parents also of the consequences that might come up of the replacement of the television sets with the bookshelves. He says, the screams and the yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. The children might protest in these ways. But he tells the parents, "Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they will now begin to feel the need of having something to read." So he suggests the parents that you need not fear the protest of the children, because after the passage of couple of days they are going to find nothing but to read. And come they start, oh boy, you watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen. They'll wonder what they'd ever seen in that ridiculous machine. That nauseating, foul, unclean, repulsive television screen. And later, each and every kid will love you more for what you did. Here, the poet tries to actually explain the readers that once the television sets are thrown out and the reading habit is inculcated amongst the people, or rather the children, they are going to find this activity of reading very, very joyful, and they are going to think that how they had been spending their energy, or rather they had been spending in fact their time, not energy but their time, in watching or being engaged with that ridiculous machine, which gave them nothing but a kind of a very foul and unclean experience. And furthermore, all these children, after realizing the negative effects, negative consequences of engaging themselves with the television sets, are going to thank the parents for the beautiful deed that the parents have done, that is replacing the television sets. In fact, the idiotic box, in fact, the monstrous device with the bookshelves. Now, if you look into the different themes here in this poem, you are going to find the basic idea of television being an idiotic box, which actually is further elaborated with the negative consequences of watching the television, like Wise coming up with the death of imagination, how this television is making the generation dull and bland, and he furthermore gives us the better way. He gives us the solution to keep ourselves active and not let our imagination die. He tells us, he suggests us, he advises his readers to get engaged in reading books. A beautiful message has been given by the poet, where he intends to teach people about the negative impact television has on children. The televisions are monsters, but books are filled with wondrous, fine, and fantastic tales. The strength of the poem is its tone. The poet keeps his audience in mind, therefore, the tone of the poem is light, amusing, and entertaining. The poet uses angry and sarcastic tone while talking about television, calling it shocking, ghastly junk, kills imagination, rots the sense, etc. In contrast, he uses easy, calm, and delightful words when he tells us about reading books. Thus, the tone and the choice of words add to the didactic element of the poem. Didactic element means something that teaches us, and this is Roald Dahl, who is the British author, poet, and remember he was British fighter pilot in World War II. Thank you.